Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on getting more players in your game with UA. My name is Luke Pretty. I'm the head of education at Yoda One. Today we're going to be talking about getting more players with UA. It's going to be a very interesting and insightful conversation. I have a great guest expert here with me today. Before we get into the discussion, I want to just quickly introduce today's webinar, talk about a little bit how we're going to go through the discussion, a little bit about Yoda One, then we'll get into it. So today we're going to be discussing this topic. We're going to be answering questions. We're going to hopefully be sharing the insights that you need about UA. If you have questions throughout, please ask them. If it's a simple question, ask in the chat. If you have a more involved question, put it into the Q&A. Now, a little bit about Yoda One. Yoda One started in 2011, publishing hit games like Rodeo Stampede, Crossy Road, Transformers Earth Wars, and along the way, we figured out how to make the most money possible with our games. We built a machine to do that. Then in 2019, we made that available to everyone with a monetization platform called Maz, which you may have heard of. Maz helps now thousands of developers around the world make more money with ads in their games. We might get into that a little bit more later on as well. So our guest expert today is Nadia Marchinska. She is the game marketing leader at Yoda One, and it's great to have her here today. Nadia, good to speak with you.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia.
Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, introduce yourself.
I'm happy to join today's webinar. So I am a game marketing leader at Yoda One publishing team. Working with UA, and I'm very excited to join today's webinar and share more tips with you guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning a bit more as well from you today, Nadia. Maybe just to set a sort of foundation before we get into some of the more involved topics, we could just state, well, UA is kind of a buzzword, right? A lot of people know it, but maybe don't know exactly what it is. So could you just explain what UA is?
All right. Well, so UA stands for user acquisition. You may also hear something like growth marketing, growth hacking, performance marketing. It's basically a data-driven marketing for your product, where each campaign is optimized based on specific data signals and metrics.
Now, with our own games, we're doing UA. We've been doing it for a long time. What is if you could extrapolate out a process, what is the process? And what are some of the insights? We can get into that. What are some of the insights that we can draw from that process for building a UA campaign?
Okay, I see. So if we are talking about the new game that is not exposed to the market yet, I think the UA is still inevitable to grow this game. And if you actually believe that your game is unique or it has a good selling point comparing to its peers, then you should definitely prove it by data and run the basic UA testing. I suggest you start with 1 or 2 weeks test on Google or Facebook ads or some of the SDK channels like Iron Source, depending on your game genre, with a minimum budget you can afford per day. And perhaps you could also, if your budget is tight, you can consider running your UA campaign in some of the countries with lower CPI benchmarks. And yeah, that's my suggestion.
So two weeks is a good time frame for an initial test. And then what are you trying to get out of that test? What are you trying to learn from it that then you would turn into perhaps a larger, more serious campaign if you were going to?
Yeah, so you may have some metrics when, let's say, you're having about 1 or 200 DAU in your game now, and you have some metrics and it looks really good to you, but it may not be the same when you reach few thousand DAU. So my suggestion is to acquire enough users to have at least 3 to 5,000 DAU to actually look into some specific metrics on your side. To start with retention of your product. If it's having ads in game like our mass, you need to look into impressions per DAU and your eCPM. And it is also like a constant battle of balancing between your impressions per DAU and retention to ensure your player has good experience in game.
Sure, yeah.
And yeah, and if it's another type of game that has more of in-app purchase stuff, so you need to focus on your pay rate of the new users that you're getting and how much they actually pay. So the average revenue per paying user. And also some essentials of your product that has to be like, they have to be monitored on a daily basis. Is like ANR and crush rates to start with. Yeah.
So when you're going into a campaign, is that something that you would do right off the bat initially? We're trying to measure this, and this, and sort of make a list of things that are going to be tracked first, and so you know what you're looking for, as opposed to just sort of trying something and not knowing exactly what you're looking at. You want to extract the most value from that investment as possible, right?
Yeah, exactly. So before launching any UA test, right, investing any budget into that, we already have some metrics in mind, like benchmarks in mind, how much retention we want to achieve after this 7-day testing, and how much eCPM, impression per DAU, shall be for the ad monetized game, right? So for each of the game genre, it's different, right? For each of the country that you will target, it's also different. Yeah.
So yeah, you're sort of looking at it more as a scientist rather than there. You have to sort of separate yourself from being for example, I made this game, I love this game, and you have to see yourself as someone who's trying to solve a problem about how to achieve X goal, right? And that's a change in mentality in a way, if you don't already have that way of looking at it, right? It can be a change in mentality if you're doing it on your own. I'm curious, from your experience, what are some of the things that you've learned, sort of higher level insights from running UA campaigns just throughout your career? Some things that maybe are, I wish I'd known that earlier, and maybe some things that are absolute musts to keep in mind.
Wow, that's a very broad question.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Honestly,
I'm good at broad questions.
Yeah, a lot of things I have learned on each step of my career. To start with ASO, like never underestimate ASO, for example. This is a very big learning I had before. As I've been working with some other mobile apps like video editor before and e-commerce, I've seen that ASO is really good stuff for such products. But then when I joined gaming industry, I thought, okay, this might not be the case. And then eventually I kept still trying to do that, and it proved itself a lot. The outcome was very surprising for me. So this is one of the learnings. Yeah. And a lot of more things we can talk about this unstoppably, actually.
So yes, don't underestimate the organic, because ASO is free. You don't have to. I mean, you can do that on your own. That's interesting. Any sort of big mistakes that people tend to make that are easy to avoid if you know to avoid them?
Yeah, as I mentioned, your metrics can be very tricky if you have very little users at this point. So actually believing that the game is doing great when you have only a few hundreds of DAU, I think it's a biggest mistake you can make. So definitely,
Being satisfied too soon, basically.
yeah. Definitely, you need to test stuffs more and add more users to see the picture clearly. Yeah, you need to be more confident in that before
So,
investing more.
well, that's an interesting one. That's a mindset. Think big, right? But how do you get a perspective on what you should be going for? Is that a matter of being in game dev communities and seeing what other people are getting? How do you find out what a realistic, ambitious goal is? Because it's easy to be too ambitious or not ambitious enough. Is it just a matter of talking to people or research?
Well, I think that it is important to research the market, looking at other games, what are other people doing, other small developers, big publishers, what are they doing? How do they even make their screenshots for their games,
Right.
their icon for their game? What is their subtitle, right? Like those kind of small things that can give you a clue that, oh, maybe my game is not really looking as good as that, and this is something that I could improve right here, right now. And yeah, researching on that is definitely is a
Worthwhile.
good way. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Now I want to sort of talk about this question of, what I'm a smaller developer, imagine. At what stage of my growth I've already focused on ASO. I'm getting more organic downloads because I'm getting better at it, right? It's growing. At what stage do I start actually exploring UA? So I guess, is that how big do I need to get before it's a reasonable thing for me to think, yeah, now I need to really invest in UA?
Okay, I see. Well, let's assume that you have enough users, and
What
you enough
what is
users,
enough?
I
What
mean
is enough?
few thousand of DU to start with.
Okay,
So
a
you
few
are
thousand
seeing
DAU. Okay.
your metrics, and you are looking into your users LTV. It's the X amount, right? Then you are starting some UA testing, or you also have asked some of your friends who are working on similar games that actually run UA, or you had reached out to us, to Yoda One, for advice, right? You're working with us, so um, we told you that, okay, the actual eCPI for this kind of game is going to be about Y amount. So if you see that, oh, my LTV is actually higher than eCPI, then I may hit the positive return on ad spend. So why don't I try to invest this much money, right? And then once I start scaling UA, I would see that it's not decreasing, or it's still quite positive. Then I can keep growing my game. Yeah.
Okay, so just to sort of, as I understand it, recap that. So once I hit a few thousand DAU from ASO and other organic marketing, then I would think about whether or not an ad spend over a 2-week period would be a good investment, because I see that the LTV of my users is relatively high.
Yeah,
Correct?
sure.
Yeah, okay.
So let's say your LTV is about $2 per user.
Mm-hmm.
Then your game, maybe assume, is a casual game, and I'm sure you can get about $1 CPI if it's iOS, let's say. So you're definitely going to hit the positive ROAS in this case, right? Plus, there are a lot of more things for you to challenge. So I want you to think about your UA testing as like challenging some specific hypothesis, right? So here I'm testing that my retention will be over 35%. The retention of day one will be over 35%, or yes or no, right? Or here I'm testing that for each of the users that I bought, I'm gonna get 2 more organic users. which is like K factor, right? So there's always like this kind of challenge. You're challenging a specific question in your UA testing.
K factor is organic uplift from ad spend. Is that right? So you spend money and then there's a natural uplift based on how much you spend, and that's called a K factor, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay. I remember that somewhere, but I just wanted to check. So I like that way of thinking of it. You're not just saying I'm tracking these things when I run this first UA test. I have benchmarks. Things I expect to happen as a hypothesis. I like that way of looking at it, because then you have a sort of pass-fail. I didn't make it. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not quite there. Maybe I'll wait a few months and try again. That's an interesting way of going about it. Well, I wanted to mention, so Nadia, you just mentioned, reach out to us. So I just wanted to bring that up quickly. I have, of course, a couple more questions I want to ask, but one thing that I think is really important is that, not everybody knows everything. Yoda One has been doing this for a long time. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have an ad monetization platform called Maz. If you're interested in making more money with ads in your game and you don't have the time to mess with mediation and figure all of that out, Maz is an AI-driven ad monetization solution that helps developers around the world make a lot more money than they were making before. If you want to learn more about it, you can click on the link that we have in the chat, and also you could scan the QR code. Now, I wanted to mention this specifically now because Nadia talked about reaching out to us. If you register for Maz within the next 7 days, you can get a free one-on-one consultation, have a free one-on-one chat about UA, about your ad monetization strategy, about where you place ads, ADR, right? Ad design recommendations. And even if you want to talk about ASO, one of our experts can talk with you and help you improve different aspects of your game. We have a lot of experience in this. Over 1 billion players Yoda One has gained over the years, so we know what we're doing. So scan the QR code or click on the link. So I wanted to break down a little bit, Nadia, some of the metrics you mentioned, but maybe just for those who might not understand all of them, just to sort of clarify them, could we just one more time say what the most important metrics are with an explanation of each one? Maybe this is a teaching moment. I understand K factor now. That's sort of the organic lift. But what are some of those specific metrics, and what do they mean exactly for the UA campaign?
Yeah, okay. So K factor is your organic uplift. That's clear.
Yep, I got it. I got that one.
I don't think retention is a new word for anybody. Yeah, it's like how long if your users are able to retain in your game within specific time, right? Then your average revenue per your daily active users, which is consistent of, if it's the ad monetized game, it consists of impressions per daily active user and your eCPM on the market. Yeah, so basically how much different ad networks within monetization are ready to pay for 1,000 of impressions in your game, something like that. Yeah, and if it's once again in-app purchase game, it's more hardcore and it has some skins to buy and stuff like that, then you should focus on pay rate. So out of all of the users that are coming into your game, how many of those are actually paying for it? And then for each of those paying users, how much on average you can actually earn. Those are things that you can focus, and you need to do some sort of A/B testing in the game, right? So if I let's say if it's an in-app purchase game, right? If I want to put this item on sale or this item on sale, and then you keep testing those things to actually improve those metrics that I mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. And can you clarify you also said LTV, right? Is that how much they've spent minus how much you spent to get them, or is that just a pure number of what they're? I guess maybe you could clarify that one for me.
Yeah, sure. This is very essential part. So the LTV is your user's lifetime value, which means
Right.
is the number of how much revenue the user will generate within his whole time spent in your game. So this is usually based on, once again, your average revenue per active user and your retention. So those
Oh,
two
I see.
metrics are what building this LTV. Yeah.
I see. I see. Okay, so you're looking at those two things combined to figure out what is the overall investment worth for each user, right? Essentially,
Yeah.
if so, that would be a very different. It would be very different if you had a hyper casual game with much higher churn as opposed to uh, a game with maybe fewer users who stayed for a long 20-minute sessions every day. That would be two very different things, right?
Yeah,
Potentially.
that's why we have a thing called cohort LTV. So
Hmm.
basically, you'll be looking into maybe first 7 days LTV of your users or something like that,
Mm,
depending on your game genre once again, right? Maybe your game is a hardcore game and your users will stay on average, you have retention up till 180 days or something, and
right.
that is a different thing. And then hyper casual, maybe you are only able to retain some users barely up to 60 days on average. So yeah, it depends on that a lot.
Well, that would also determine your monetization strategy, right? In a big way.
Yeah.
For those two cases, if you know you have higher churn just because of the nature of the game, as opposed to 180 days on average, how would you think about monetization?
I would definitely, well, it means that you need to focus your efforts on your ads in
Okay.
game for sure. So 90% of your revenue would be coming from ads on hyper casual. Yeah.
So for then maybe the hardcore game would be maybe a little leaning a little bit more on IAPs or things like that.
Your hardcore game may not even have ads at all. That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of level of, yeah,
Okay.
how hardcore it is. Yeah.
I wanted to get back to this question of benchmarking. So you talked about running a test, an initial test, or running a campaign, and then knowing when to stop, when you haven't passed, I guess. Not to ask a negative question, but when would you decide, okay, not worth it, I will re-explore the question of UA later? Is it just a matter of how many players you have? I mean, is it, I guess, how would you explore that question?
It's like sort of like when to stop, right?
Yes, when to stop. When do I know I'm okay? This is a continually bad investment that I'm doing. This I should be I should spend money on marketing elsewhere, or maybe getting an influencer or something like that. I should look elsewhere for investment.
Well, as I mentioned, you need to focus on your ROAS, which is return on ad spend, right? ROAS
Yeah.
value. It has to be positive. So if after all of the preliminary UA testing, you actually were confident that you want to make it work, and eventually within first 2 months, let's say, your eCPI is higher than LTV, and you are not able to improve it yet, like you don't see the way to make it better, or either way, on the eCPI decreasing side or improving your LTV, whatever you are trying, it's not working and it's actually not improving your LTV or eCPI, I think you should stop, or at least minimize your spend in this case till the point where you would have another new idea to improve either of those, right?
Right. Well, isn't that one advantage that a larger studio or publisher would have, because they have a gigantic art team who's constantly able to just pump out endless iterations of creatives. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit. What if it's not working because of the creatives that I'm using in my campaigns? How do you approach that from the creatives standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
Oh, thank you. Thought of
So
it myself.
a lot of publishers, I don't think it's a secret, but they would test their creatives even before the actual game's release sometimes. So you are actually giving a demo to the user of the game.
Right.
And let's say that if your creatives are not working, your game may not work as well, right? So um, you need to focus on highlighting the best of your gameplay, right? It doesn't have to be something super complex. At least like some highlights of your gameplay, recordings, and you can also explore what other people doing. There are a lot of resources. I think Facebook Ad Library has a lot of insights on that, like, and TikTok as well, I think has a free platform where you can explore on that. So you can get the idea what ads look like, and you can experiment as much as you want on that. Yeah, but for sure, if your creatives are not working in your campaign, this is one of the benchmarks that you also need to think about, that if you're able to reach the specific conversion rate, in other words, IPM, this is something that we actually use the most. It's impressions per mile, right? So, oh, sorry, installs per mile. So it means that how many installs per 1,000 impressions you can get. Like,
I
what is
see.
your actual conversion rate of the creative? So this is something that you need to benchmark at the beginning as well, on the creative side. Otherwise, your campaign would not simply run.
So if I understand that, and please tell me if I'm wrong, one thing to do there, let's again say I don't have that large budget, or I don't have a large art team to be testing this stuff. One sort of trick there would be to model, not necessarily copy, but model, but look at what the top publishers and studios are doing, and kind of try to figure out, okay, there are a few patterns here in how they're testing these things on TikTok or wherever, and then maybe emulate a few of those, to model those, so that I don't have to experiment as much as they do. Is that a fair takeaway from what you said?
I think so. And also, don't forget that your product is actually your best source of insights on the creative side as well. Because if you're able to see what are the actual like features that your players use the most, then it's something that you may want to feature in your creatives as well. And you don't even need to look into any other publishers for that.
Oh, so your players are already telling you. You just need to pay attention to them. Would that be like read reviews? Oh, I love this character, or some specific thing that you're seeing a big response related to, and then focus on that in the creatives?
Yeah, on the initial side, it's going to be reviews and the feedback, right, from your players.
Yeah.
And I think what's more is later on, if you're able to integrate some data analytics tools in your game to actually track on each stage of player experience, how would they interact with this or that part of the game, is also going to give you more insights on that.
And your other piece of advice would be, when you start, let's say, making the game, start putting out your creatives then, rather than waiting until it's published, to validate the ideas as you go, which might help shape the game itself, right?
I think so. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, that's another shift in just the mentality of, that's across different industries. A lot of the ones who are doing things successfully are testing ideas that could become products that don't even exist to get feedback in order to figure out whether or not they should put resources into that. So that's very very useful insight. We're gonna get to some questions, some audience questions from the Q&A, Nadia, in just a minute. But I wanted to ask one more question. Let's say I've decided I don't have the resources to commit to UA right now. I'm not going to do it, right? We talked about ASO. Are there any other things that developers can do to get more players, or for me to earn more money? We mentioned UA is a great, or we mentioned ASO, excuse me, is a great way to do that without paying. Any other things like that I want to make more money, I want to start making a living, I want to get more players in general?
Yeah, sure. I suggest you build your community who would strongly support you from the very first steps you take. So basically those few hundred of friends in your Discord or Twitter, they might be your first testers and they would give you the best feedback. And nobody cancel the share of voice, right? So they could also share with others about your game, and it can start growing organically. And there are also other ways to grow your user base. I think is as a part of the community, building the community, right? You can also focus on some social media marketing. So build some social media pages and try to get in touch with some on the initial stages. I think it makes sense. Get in touch with some YouTubers, some TikTokers, I don't know, KOLs that are not that famous yet, and maybe you can actually work with them for free and they would promote your game.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you don't, when people think of influencers, they think also of having to spend a lot of money, but that's not the. I mean, there are a lot of influencers who are also playing games and not being paid, and some people have figured out how to get them to do that, right? So to be creative in that department. Are there any specific places where communities are more impactful? Like, for example, is Twitter better than Discord? Is Discord better than Twitter? Or do all of them?
I would suggest do all of them, but I think that you need to have as much exposure, as much exposure as you can, and then you can bring in those players. Yeah.
Good advice. So Nadia, we're going to get to some questions that we've got here in the Q&A, if you don't mind sticking around for a couple minutes.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Thanks. Before we do that, I wanted to mention one more time the limited time offer. If you're looking at your monetization strategy and you're thinking, for the players that I have, I could be making more money with ads. My ad performance is not great, and you're thinking about how to do this better. Yoda One has an ad monetization solution called MAS, Managed Ad Services, which uses AI to better optimize your ads. It mediates between mediators and ad networks to give you the most money possible. If you register within the next 7 days, you can also get a free one-on-one consultation with one of our experts on, if you want to talk to them about UA, if you want to talk to them about marketing, about ad placements, ad monetization strategy, they would be happy to talk with you. So click on the link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code, and remember to register within the next 7 days. Okay, a couple of questions here. I'm just going to read it out. Give me 1 second. Okay, this is more connected to the creatives. Where can I learn about making creatives? I guess that would be maybe someone who knows they need better creatives but doesn't have the skills or the skills to make them themselves?
I see. Well, to start with, let's talk about video creatives, right? You can just make basic footages of your game, highlighting the best parts of your game that you believe. And also, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of information out there. Like Facebook ad library is free to use to explore, free to explore. TikTok also has a platform like that. Yeah, there are a lot. If you want to find this information, I'm sure you can find it within first few links in Google. Yeah.
So just start looking around. Yeah. Okay. Would you recommend hiring someone on Upwork or Fiverr to create stuff for you, or just start with gameplay video and see how it goes from there?
Or you can start with gameplay video, but I don't want to advertise Fiverr much here, but I think it's a great platform to find resources.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, why not? Totally. In my experience, we've been working with some freelance creative designers as well. So if you're able to actually guide them with specific details, what you want from the video, yeah, why not? It could be a very efficient way to make creatives.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. This is not about UA. This is about the game in general. This is hopefully you can not disappoint this person. My game has only a few downloads. If my retention is not good, should I just give up on my game? Quit completely.
Okay, depends on what is not good, you know? But let's say, I mean, how not good it should be. I wish they gave more specific number, but there is definitely a reason for that, right? And you need to look for a reason, what actually makes users not staying in your game. At the initial stages, you can look at the reviews is a good way to find out. You try to test once again your game as much as you can with your community and with your friends to see what is actually wrong with that. And what you can do, you can highlight some pain points that you think that, okay, this might be a reason. A, it might be a reason, B might be a reason, C might be a reason, and then try to adjust something to prove that maybe A is the one that is affecting it, right?
Yeah.
And then see if your retention improved, and B or C and so on. I don't think it should be the main reason for you to give up on your game, rather than actually try to do something on improving this part.
I think that's a really important thing to highlight. We've talked about it several times throughout our conversation, but you have to separate. If you're more the type who just likes making games and likes the creative aspect or the coding aspect, if you want to make a successful game, you have to focus on the business part of it. And to do that, you have to become like a scientist in a way. And that's being analytical about exactly what things are people telling me, what feedback inputs am I getting, and what changes should happen based on those feedback inputs. But that's not, I mean, for a lot of different things. It's a great source of knowledge. Reviews are a great source of knowledge for insights about how you should change your App Store listing page, right? You change the keywords that you use based on reviews. As you said, ideas for creatives that you might try, and how to fix the game. It seems like a great place for insights to use. That's important to mention, I think.
Yeah, and I want to add that you actually need to think like a player yourself, right? If those people actually installed your game, they did that for a certain reason. There must be some selling point that attracted them, right? So what is there in their first time user experience, right? This is also one of the things the product people should look into. First time user experience, what is in it that makes them leave the game so soon, right?
Right.
So those two things that you need to, like, one thing is to become a businessman and do all of the metrics and numbers, but another thing also thinking logically and put yourself in the player's place and actually analyze this through.
Yeah, which can be tough to do if you made it and you're sort of outside of it in that way, or too close to it, right? So to try to be objective, it can be tough to develop that, but worth trying for sure. Last question here. Sounds like it is impossible to grow without a publisher. What should I do? I don't know. I don't know what you want to make of that question.
Well, as a publisher side, I would say that it's always good to work with a publisher because they can give you a lot of benefits that you may not have alone. They would support you with the whole team, not even talking about the investment and stuff like that. But I still know a lot of cases where developers were able to grow by themselves till the certain limit at least. So yeah, once again, build your community. If people like your game, they will start sharing it more. And ASO.
It's what I was going to say. I was hoping you were going to say it. Yeah, interesting. ASO and community is the first step, really, then, right? First stage, ASO and community. All right. Any other things you want to share or mention, Nadia? It's been great speaking with you. I appreciate all of the insights and tips. I've learned a lot. Is there anything else you wanna share?
Thanks, I'm good here. Yeah, I hope we have some people actually benefiting from our tips today. And
Hope so.
once again, if you guys want to have advice from an expert and you want to try the new monetization service for your game, you should reach out to us. Yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Nadia. I was just about to say that. So yeah, if you click on the link, scan the QR code, and as Nadia mentioned, you can talk with one of our experts. I mean, as I said, we've been doing this for 10 years, so the amount that you can learn from 10 billion players is a lot. So talking with us, you get a lot of those insights, a lot of that expertise. We have a pretty good view of the landscape. So sign up for Maz within the next 7 days, and you can get access to that advice, that help. Again, Nadia, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time. I know you're very busy running awesome UA campaigns for our games. Thank you all for joining. Look out for future webinars that we do in the future. If you have things you want us to focus on, just let us know. And if you have any questions, also reach out. And the last thing I would say, click on the link, scan the QR code. I will see you next time.